Good morning, Philippines. Happy Sunday to everyone. Okay, bagong gising lang tayong lahat. Wow, it's a Sunday morning and it's a lovely Sunday morning. It's not too hot, not too sunny. Um, well, it's a perfect day to talk about concepts, ideas, and which we will be doing today again. And just want to say good morning to the viewers right now. Good morning to you, Max, and good morning to you, Lani, and to all those viewers right now. Please do share us, share this live button, share the live button, and we would love to. What do you call this? We would love people to hear about what we will be talking about today. Our guest today is again um, from Boston, and it's nighttime there. It's 9:02 a.m. there in Boston, and we're happy to have someone who will talk about equity, diversity, and grace. She has been teaching and since 1998, and since early 2000, she's been holding leadership positions in the school district in Boston. So without further ado, let's bring in our guest today, uh, Cyndi Bradley. Good morning to you, Cindy, or good evening. Should I say good evening?
Good morning to you. Thank you.
uh, thank you for joining us. Anyway, Cindy, we'd love to know more about you. Okay, please do tell us something about yourself.
Well, originally I'm from Barbados, a very small island in the Caribbean. My family and I immigrated here in the early 80s. Education in Barbados is a very important part of the culture, so it's naturally inbred within me by my family, though we were living in America. And
Uh-huh.
thus, it's only, common that I would groom into someone that believes in education and equity and diversity and inclusion within education. So I've held teaching positions at the elementary level and the middle school level, leadership positions from school based all the way up to the state level where I currently am. And I'm also an adjunct professor at a local university, not too far from where I live in Boston.
Hmm, okay. Right now you hold a leadership position, right?
I
And
do.
we would love to understand the journey being, since one of the topics here is diversity. So, being of a different race, how was the journey from the 80s till now?
Mhm.
Was there was there some sort of discrimination, the struggle? Was there already an improvement? The reason why I ask is that these concepts are things we would like to see here more
Mhm.
in our system. Maybe the teachers watching us right now can share with us their experience of handling a diverse classroom, meaning to say a classroom of students from different, let's say, culture, province, religion. Um, are there any bullying? So I'm throwing that question to the teachers watching us right now. So going back to my question, did you see a sort of improvement? What did you feel? So we'd love to hear that, Cindy.
Um, it's funny. I think my earliest experience was when we came to America. And I had a very heavy accent, not an American accent, but a Barbadian accent.
Yeah.
And I would assume now that it might have been difficult for teachers to understand. But I remember them thinking that I was not smart at all.
Oh.
And that was one of my entrance into the American classroom. So they did an assessment, some sort of testing to see how I tested, and I actually tested higher than any child they ever saw. Thus, they contacted my mom and said they wanted to skip me a few grades, and my mother said absolutely not
Oh.
because of social purposes. She didn't want to do it. So, needless to say, that was my entry into the American education system, and thus why I still fight it today. Very complex, many layers
Uh
of
huh.
just pure whiteness, and not understanding other cultures, because whiteness is a prevalent culture to lead,
Right.
and just breaking through the barriers by being determined and persistent, because you too should shine, not just one race or culture over the other. We all are here
Right.
for a reason, and we all have the opportunity. So,
Uh-huh. All right. So yeah, great story there. Well, Alpha, our friend Alpha, mentioned something about she wants to see you talk about equity, and I wonder why. What is with you in equity? What is your role in the school system in equity?
Um, well, I think I just lead with my moral compass to begin with. And my moral
Uh huh.
compass was probably developed from my family, of course, amongst
Oh
other
yes.
things.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not in school for me. I have a bachelor's degree, I have a high school diploma, I have a
Mm-hmm.
very high IQ, I have a master's degree. I'm
Mm-hmm.
there for students. So when I see that people aren't acting on the in the best interest of students, it kind of like grinds my gears a little and gets me moving towards calling out what I see.
Yeah.
And maybe that's perhaps what Alpha's talking about. It usually has to do with race, often with young black boys, and most recently young black girls. But I
Uh,
would call it out, to the person that is, doing the inappropriate behavior. Very
okay.
kindly, but call it out nevertheless.
All right. So, can you tell us what really is the definition of equity, and how can it be applied to, the school system?
So, when I think about equity, my definition is just all inclusive, making sure that those that don't have receive what they need in order to reach whatever that learning target is. And those
Mm-hmm.
that can easily reach it may not need as much help, really giving students what they need to succeed, through an organic approach. So, it may not be just intelligence or cognitively. It may be socially, it may be emotionally, it may be when we think about, did that child come from, a lower socioeconomical status? Like, did they have breakfast? Did they have dinner? So every child may not need a snack, but if a child needs a snack to keep going, I think part of our job is to make sure that we create an environment that would give them the snack.
Oh, okay. So, it doesn't mean that if there are like 10 students, everyone gets a snack.
No,
Only those.
absolutely not.
Okay. So only those that really need it gets
Would
it,
get
right?
it. Right.
Okay. Okay.
So,
Yeah. Go
so
ahead.
that's the difference between equity and equality. So
Yeah.
equality would be more if you have 10 students, all 10 students have a snack. That's
Mm-hmm.
equality. And equity is if you have 10 students and only three need the snack to sustain this classroom, to keep going, to pull that determination, those are the ones that would get it. The others are doing just fine without it.
But both equity and equality are still given high importance, right? I mean,
Yes.
in okay, so okay, I see. And how can that be applied in, let's say, for example, in lessons, or let's say, for example, in our case here, um, there are places in the provinces that don't have connectivity,
Mhm.
so, but because of the pandemic, we are forced to, stay home and learn at home. So, how would equity work in that setting?
So that's a complex one, but I can give you a couple of options.
Sure, sure.
I think the first thing is teachers have to know their students, because if you know your students, then you know your students'
Right.
needs. And if you know your students' needs, then you can advocate for your students. So you have to know your students. You have to know yourself in order to know that you can advocate. But if you're, shy, or if you don't want to stir the trouble, you just have to know who you are, because you might not advocate on behalf of a student when you need to. And I think the other thing within the pandemic that needs to be said is knowing how providences are surviving. What do they need? Because education is important, but food is also important, right? So you
Mm-hmm.
have to think about what students entirely need organically all around, not in just one area, and really figure out ways creatively to apply yourself to helping them get those needs met.
I see. So, I think we've already started talking about strategies on how to apply equity, right? By starting with the needs of understanding the needs of the students. Okay.
Yes.
For those watching us right now, maybe you can share with us, is there a certain framework that you use so that the teachers can effectively apply equity in their classroom? Um, yeah, maybe you can share a framework or some
So,
strategies.
some of the frameworks that I kind of refer to, there's not one framework because it's
Mm-hmm.
not a one size fit all, and that's what equity
Right.
is.
Uh-huh.
But some frameworks that are very inclusive are frameworks that really speak to the socio emotional aspect of children. You know where children are developmentally. If you can find a framework that shows you where children are developmentally, and when we think about neuroscience and neuropsychology, you
Uh-huh.
kind of get the whole child. So it's not just the academic piece, it's the social emotional piece, it's the financial piece, it's the community piece, is making sure that students belong to the environment to which you're providing. And all of that together builds a framework for beginning to think about your students and what they need and how to get it to them.
Hmm, okay, I see. So, let me ask the viewers right now. Um, we hope you can help us by sharing your experiences in the classroom. Uh, my question is this to all the viewers: Have you what sort of strategies you do so that you can apply equity in your classroom, so you can make sure that all the students are learning and they are effectively getting the lessons. Okay. Before we read your comments, before we read your answers, let us first read the greetings. Okay. So someone said good morning, and let's read those good mornings from Anisha. Good morning to you. Lelaine, good morning. Brian, good morning. Hanulet, happy Sunday to you too. Bambi, good morning. Bernadette, oh, a lot of people. Good morning. Of course, Cassiopeia, good morning. Good morning. Here's a comment from Cassiopeia. Indeed, fair and just education for all, no student left behind. So those watching, how do you make sure that no student are left behind? Okay. The, so someone's watching from north of Manila, northern province. Watching from La Trinidad Benguet. Wow, strawberry capital of the Philippines. Yes, indeed. And someone from down uh, south of Manila. So good morning, Bella, and good morning. So my question again to you, teachers. How do you make sure that no student is left behind? Well, here's the thing right now. With what is happening, I've seen provinces, okay? I've seen places where teachers print out materials, those provinces with no connectivity, where teachers print out materials and have it distributed to, the different students, just to make sure those students have materials for their school. And so, yeah. So anyway, Cindy, um, in the U.S., the school shifted to digital learning since March, right?
Right.
Because of the pandemic. So, um, what were the technological experiences of your teachers when it comes to delivering lessons online?
Well, what I will say is everyone didn't switch to technology at first because of inequities. They couldn't, budgetary wise, some schools weren't prepared to switch right away while others were. So those that were prepared began on time. At the time that you spoke about, those that were not prepared were still passing out copies of work to students as well. So your country's not alone in passing out packets. America was passing them out as
Oh,
well.
that's good to know.
So the one thing I can say is we had some struggles. Teachers had to catch up pretty quickly. Google platform became a platform of choice because it's very forgiving.
Uh-huh.
And then other schools use platforms that they paid for. But pretty much we decided based on the guidance from the state how we would appropriate with classrooms.
Mm-hmm.
And schools just work within those parameters. So some schools had students learning their regular schedules, and other
Uh-huh.
schools had students on an abbreviated schedule. There were some schools that used technology and some schools that combined technology with print. So it really, once again, was trying to figure out the best option for each district, and there are many districts in Mass. But what I will say is we were not prepared to even go into technology in this fashion.
Yeah.
And not being prepared really made us learn as we go. So we did a lot of learning as we went in Massachusetts.
Oh, but how about this coming September? What has there already been a consolidation of all the experiences and best practices?
So those are still being gathered. And guidance recently came out last, I think, Thursday. We
Uh-huh.
received new guidance on how we would move the school. But once again, guidance is just guidance. It's
Guidance?
heavily is heavily suggested. And between now and September, there may have changes as more data becomes available. The issue with the with COVID is that it's pretty new, and all this data is very very new. So they're
Yeah.
depending on other countries and other states who've had a lot of experience, and then combining best practices from research based and evidence based states. So
Oh.
so that's what we're doing right now.
Oh, okay. Okay. Good to know. So here's one from Bea. She said, identify accommodations for every type of learner. I think this is the answer to our question earlier on how they bring in equity into their classroom. But anyway,
I did
let's
have
go.
another
Yeah,
answer to
sure.
that one.
Yeah,
One that she can actually, two things that she can look at, or your teachers can look at:
yeah.
Bloom's taxonomy and
Oh
multiple
yeah,
intelligencies. So, along with what I said earlier, I would add Bloom's taxonomy and multiple intelligencies. They'll both help you be more equitable within the classroom, from my perspective.
oh, okay, interesting. So you go back understanding the needs, and based on the needs, you look at Bloom's taxonomy,
You're right.
and see what applies to them. Okay, so let's backtrack a bit. When you were started teaching, okay, when
Mm-hmm.
you were starting out teaching, okay, so how do you handle what was the concept of equity back then in the 90s was already applied? Was it just a new concept back then? And um, how did you handle the class before? So I guess if that's a new concept back then in the 90s, maybe that's somehow new, and maybe we can learn on how the strategies were back then.
I would say back then it was about equality. Give every student
Right.
everything, and they're all going to learn. Just give it to them. Everyone is 10 pencils, 10 students. Everyone gets a pencil.
Right.
So I would say when I first started out, it was really about equality, and then we started to look at the whole child. So we started to look at the child more organically and realize, oh, it's not just about cognitive. If they slept bad last night, or they didn't have dinner, or there was a death in the family, these were things that, can really traumatize children and really weigh in on their behaviors and their practices in the classroom. So we started to look at something called efficacy through that. Just, how can we be more kinder? How do we apply, you know, equality to being kind, that kind of thing. I think from there it moved to being culturally responsive, because data began to show that the students that we were not being kind to were students of color, whether they were Black students, Latino students, Asian students, Native American students. It doesn't matter. It was students of color. As research began to develop, and we got more research and more evidence, we realized that it was Black students that were really suffering the most. And then we started to move more towards cultural responsiveness and equity. And I think that's where the equity piece came in, because we were giving students everything, and we weren't seeing that dial move as we would expect it to. And then we realized, well, everyone doesn't need everything, but there are some people that need a little more and some need a little less. And how will we spend our time figuring that out? And I think that's the era we're in right now. Figuring out how will we spend our time figuring out what our students need so we can get it to them.
Okay. So, so what were the? I guess my next question would be, what were the results coming from equality, giving them everything, and now equity when it's more targeted, right? I mean,
Right.
really trying to understand what's happening. Um, so, has there been a data that says, okay, this has been effective?
What I will say is, I think the results right now are very catastrophic. It's causing a lot of tension amongst many adults because now you have adults of color speaking out about the inequities and adults that are not of color not understanding what the adults of color are speaking about. So it's causing a lot of confusion, this equity word, how to understand equity, how to apply equity, how to make sure that even we're showing equity to the adults in the building.
Mhm.
So equity is causing quite a stir, and I think the more data that comes out and shows that these are the populations which we misrepresent, and these are the populations which are not progressing because of the way that we are teaching them, it's causing more resistance towards that belief.
Okay, I'd like to understand that because from my perspective, equity is really a good concept. Let's say, for example, let's say you have like three kids, and of course, those kids are different from one another. So let's say i- if if as a parent you want to be equal to those to your kids, then if you will enroll one in sports, I mean you'll enroll all of them in the same sports.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but you'll enroll all of them, let's say, in training basketball. But maybe not everyone, not
And
all of
one
those
split.
would work towards basketball. So
Yeah.
hearing from you that it's not really but catastrophic. I just wonder where the adjustment should be, right? So that's where I'm curious right now. But here's a comment from. I'll ask your thoughts after that. I'll give you time to think where might be the adjustment should be. But let me
Mm-hmm.
just read this comment from Cassiopeia. Now there is more specific approach to learners. Teachers now are kinder and more
Mm-hmm.
considerate and sensitive to the needs of the student. Learning now is more proactive. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so there is some sort of misalignment in the concept and the result. So
Yes.
where should the adjustment be?
The adjustment needs to be with each of us individually. I think that we all carry and back in I don't know, back in the early '90s, maybe the early 2000s, there was a lot of talk about backpack of experience and bringing your own understanding your own backpack of experiences and how your implicit biases can really influence the teaching that you do in the classroom. I think if people hold a mirror to themselves and hold themselves accountable for their actions and their belief patterns and change those belief patterns when they see they're not yielding the impact of the intentions, I think we can change things. But holding that mirror is sometimes very difficult and is very ugly, and you may not have your own tools to work with it. But it really starts with the individual and then bringing that individual to the community, because we cannot solve these issues as individuals. We have to solve them as a community, but we have to start with ourselves first.
Yes, I agree. So I think the word there is bias, right? I mean, we have to understand what, as teachers, we need to
Yes.
understand what we bring into the class.
Hmm.
I mean, our perspectives and the way we view our students truly affect the way we teach, right? Um, I always tell this story, but I remember a teacher, a college professor, teaching business, and saying that he's already happy when 10% of his students participate. And hearing all these things, I sort of look back and should have told him to maybe adjust his way of teaching, or or I guess he has this concept of the 80-20 rule,
Yes.
focus on the focus on the 20. But in classroom, that is totally ineffective,
Right.
and should not be seen as just focusing on the 10%, which he or she feels that is important. So it
Right.
has to be applied to everyone. So I guess to the teachers, well, my lesson there, at least to me, to the teachers listening, which I'd like to share with you, is that really try to understand the differences of each student
Yeah.
and their approaches to learning,
Mhm.
and see what activities or even lessons that will attract them. Because, right, Cindy, at the end of the day, it's about learning,
It is.
right? So yeah, you were okay. I thought you were saying something. So um, well, so thinking about it now, okay. Um, Thinking about it now, talking about equity, race, diversity, how can a teacher now ensure that students um, are truly learning? I think we are going now beyond the concept of equity, but
Yeah.
really going to different strategies on managing the class. Do you have any tips on this? But before we go there, let me just read some more comments. Uh, from Marisa, teachers always considered individual differences or individualized instructions to cater to the needs of the students. Yes, I believe so. Um, Adjustment applies to both the
And the learner.
educator and the learner. Yes, I
Yes.
agree. Inside out, being responsive and open-minded
Mhm.
in the concept of learning and learners. Okay, I so before we go to the strategies, I want to look at this concept that Cassiopeia mentioned here. So it goes both ways. Okay,
Yes.
so right. So as teachers, we try to, as much as possible, apply equity in the classroom. But how do we now reverse the role that we make students understand what we are doing and the importance of what we're doing into their learning? So yeah, I have two questions now. So how do we make students understand, and how do we and the strategies for later? Yeah.
So, so I'll start with the strategies because I was thinking
Yeah.
about that one first. So, one of the
Uh huh.
strategies teachers can use, as I said before, is multiple intelligencies. This is just a quick little assessment that
Sure.
teachers can give each of their students, and they can figure out their students' learning style. Once you figure out your student's learning style and you have built a relationship with your student, you can really begin to unpack that child's learning individually and then within the community. And the other question was, how do we role reverse and make students accountable for their own actions and them being equitable as well?
Yeah.
And the way that I found it best done is just having clear standards, high standards, making norms for your classroom and for your schools and for your students, but involving students in the norm making process. So they understand what the needs are from the teachers as well as the needs are from the students, and they can hold one another accountable. So you would have spaces for students and teachers to talk, like you may have a circle framework, or maybe every classroom may have a day to share or something like that. But there has to be a time for where both students and teachers can communicate, an assembly once a month or whatever the case might be. But just really making sure that those thoughts are heard and not kept inside.
Yeah. So you I heard you mention something about what was this? I forgot a word, but making sure students get to talk to each other. Or data, yeah, leverage and data. I think that's very important. I think that's very important. Most of the time, of course, because of privacy, we don't normally necessarily show everyone the grades of each student, right?
Right.
But I guess we can leverage on something like an infographic um, uh, that can show where the students are all together versus an end goal or a target for the classroom. Maybe that can help the teachers so that students will also, uh, um, talking about inclusivity, can include themselves towards that one goal, right? I mean, leveraging on data and having a goal will help students also understand their role when it comes to equity. So
Right.
yes, Cassiopeia, it works both ways. I would just like to share the screen. Okay, I'm sure all teachers know this, but I just want to make sure that we are aligned and we are on the same page on this. I just want to share the screen on multiple intelligence. Um, okay, one moment. Let me just. Okay, so this is Gardner's, right? Uh, so this one. This is what we're talking about, right?
Yes, that is what we're talking about.
Okay, so having an understanding of students and their or their different intelligences. Do you mean that we create activities or lessons that target each individual's intelligence? Let's say, for example, someone is visually intelligent, verbally, things like this.
So when you create your lessons, you'll make sure you have experiences for all students. So for instance, body kinesthetic. So I found in my experience, a lot of boys fall under that category. So you
Right.
wouldn't want to create an environment in your classroom where every lesson is sitting down. You may have boys creating something with their hands, tactile, or things like that. So if you see a student is a fidgety student, because the student needs to learn, you may give them a ball to play with, or something to roll on the table, or a bouncy on their chair while they're learning. But every student wouldn't need that. If you were an audio learner, which means when the teacher lectures,
Yeah.
you're all in there, you can hear everything, you're in tune, then most students aren't there yet, because that requires a certain level of development and maturity. So you would speak some, but then there's some where students will be doing, and we know for a fact that we learn more by doing than anything else.
Right.
So just really figuring out where your students are, and really creating an environment that supports the multiple intelligences that show within your classroom. That's also how you can differentiate learning. Someone may be doing a project-based assignment while someone may be creating an assignment through art. So it's really, what is the objective? And their way of getting to the objective may just, need some autonomy based on their learning style.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So thank you for those suggestions there. Uh, okay. Emily. Oh, hi, Emily. She's watching. Oh my God, I missed this one. Yeah, the multiple intelligence. Uh, Here. Again, Kashipia, thank you for joining. Multiple intelligence allows the students nurture their strength in
Yeah.
specific areas of spectrum. There is also a specific approach to this kind of intelligence. All right. So, are are we um, are we not developing the other parts then? What happens to the other parts? Is that okay? I mean, will they it develop eventually?
If they have people in their lives that help them develop them, definitely. But if they don't, no, we're really repressing their strongest skill set. We're
Right.
not allowing them to work towards their potential, because we want the classroom how we want the classroom, not
Mm-hmm.
how the classroom might work best for them.
Mm-hmm.
Like my mother's house was my mother's house. It wasn't my house until I bought a house.
Yeah.
She
Yeah.
ran her house how she wanted to run it, whether I liked it or not. So we have to move away from that kind of mentality. And I'm not saying we're giving children everything, because they do need discipline, but we
Right.
really want to make sure that we're trying to meet children where they are and help them become the best that they can be, because they're going to be taking care of us one day, and we really want them to be successful in life.
True, I agree. And you mentioned something about discipline and not giving them away.
Yeah.
I want to hear more of that because for some, there is a misconception that you are taking away the discipline when you are focusing on just giving this certain things, right? So
Hmm.
how do you create the balance then in the classroom?
Standards, visual standards. You know what I mean? Make sure that your standards that or the norms you've created as a unit, as a community within within your classroom are clear. They're visible in the classroom. There's no joke. There's a
Under.
way to remind students. Students can remind one another, and that's how you keep that discipline going, holding students accountable to the standards that were created. But you have to hold yourself accountable to those standards as well, because students are watching you, so that becomes a little gray area sometimes.
Yes. Oh, yeah. So accountability is important, which it's not just about equality. Equality and equity pushed too much for some may take away the accountability, right? I mean,
Yes.
so accountability standards should always be imposed. Uh, so here are some more from Cassiopeia. Multiple intelligence allows the students to nurture. I think I Oh, allows the students nurture their strengths, specific areas of intelligence spectrum. There is also a specific approach to this kind of intelligence. I think we read that. How about this one? Gardner's theory of learning allow the students to develop well in an area. There is an assessment for this, and it's helpful. Okay. Um, love this topic because it might help me in teaching my graduate students on topics about equity and multiple intelligence. Yes, Arlene, you're talking about studies, right? Graduate students. So what do you teach? I mean, masters in education. What specific topic do you teach? So it's nice that we are already bringing in equity in the concepts here. No, so this is nice. Thank you, Arlene. So maybe you can share with us the topics you teach in your graduate class.
Yeah, that's a
So
great question.
yeah,
I
uh,
teach for the University of Massachusetts,
uh-huh.
and grad students going into education leadership.
Oh,
Um, and equity, Arlene is right in the beginning of the syllabus. It's one of my points. It's about holding each other accountable. It's about giving students equity. In my budget class, it's a really students enter that class very annoyed with me because everything is about equity. I say, when you get a budget, you have to think about your students' needs, not just what the money is there for. You know, you have the
right.
power to think about it. And conceptually, most students don't get that until towards the end of the class, and then they thank me for it. So Arlene, definitely, as soon as my syllabus comes out, I speak about equity as one of my core norms that I create by myself for the community. It's one of my standards. And then as a classroom, Arlene, we create the norms together. So it will be my four plus another three or four that we create as a community, and we hold each other to them in my graduate classes.
Okay. So you also teach in the grad school, right?
Yeah, yes.
And okay, interesting. Okay, so towards the end of the show, we're going to learn some more from Cindy on. Okay, no, I like that concept. Well, I like that idea of budget is budget.
Mm-hmm.
It's important. You can
It
have
is.
so many concepts, but if you don't have resources to implement those concepts, it won't matter at all, right?
None.
So,
None.
okay, so in a few concepts or in a few pointers, how how do you do that? Budgeting and putting equity behind your mind when I mean there in the budget.
Once again, I rely heavily on evidence-based practices. So I have articles from different community meetings that students have to read. I have articles from students of color, whether it's my Black students or Asian students or Latino students. I have articles from students of color to talk about the disadvantages within their buildings, whether it's the paint isn't there or the bathrooms don't work, or things you just need to get through a good day of school they just don't have, or they serve the cafeteria food 3 times a week, the same food, and you can see mold on it. So those articles help students to think about what is real out there and how they can tackle it. I give them the overall budget, and then they have to use different precedents from throughout the state that they choose and those articles to create a budget that's balanced.
Okay. So okay, um so how, let's say for example, okay, in my area there are no bathrooms.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So how does the school system help them on that?
So what they would do is think about what does the health department says? What does the building code say? So you have to like really dig deep. Well, what is the building code expectation? What does the health department say? So if the health department says there's 10 bathrooms for 1,000 students, and your school only has in 2 bathrooms, you have to figure out within that budget
Oh,
how you're going to get the other 8 bathrooms because that's what students need, and there's students in wealthier areas that are getting it. So one of the things you might want to think about is what do you book in your budget, or do you advocate for more in your budget, and defend that along the way.
I see. Okay. So you have data. You get information from students, their experiences, right? And okay. So to those listening right now, if you have a school, again, if you're working with a school, it's good to implement or practice equity and bring it there in your school. So before we end, let me just read a couple more comments. Multiple intelligence for ed. Oh, okay, this is what she teaches. Multiple intelligence for education students in dealing with their teachers as educational leaders when conducting training events for them. Ah, all right. I see. And from Emily. Hi, Emily. Hello, Miss Weeks. You look great. I miss
Thank
our
you.
after-school conversation and our insights.
Hi, Emily.
All right. So, Cindy, I'd like to thank you so much for your time, for spending time with us and sharing your knowledge and expertise, sharing your experiences, sharing your life story with us. And I'm sure all those watching us right now learned about so much from you, and especially on the concept of equity. And again, make sure to all those watching us right now, make sure uh, to start applying if you have not. Start applying the concept of equity in class. And for those who are already applying it, keep it up. Here's one more from Maestra Bea. School initiatives to sustain the project, setting partnership with stakeholders to support the program in reaching out to every learner.
Yes.
Yeah. I think the bulk of the work is only at the start when you're trying to get to know the needs of the students.
Yes.
But once it's there, once you keep the ball rolling, it gains momentum, it gains traction, and everything follows, right? Um, so yeah, Cindy, thank you again for your time. It was
Thank
a
you.
pleasure having you today. I hope we can have more chat, and I'm sure Emily misses the chats with you.
I missed the chats with her as well.
Right. All right. So with that, Cindy, again, thank you very much. Have a great evening. Have a great
Thank you.
Saturday evening, right? It's
And
Saturday
everyone out
there.
there, have a great Sunday. Thank you for having me.
All right. Have a good night, Cindy.
Thank you. Take
Okay, thank you. All right. So thank you, everyone, for joining me on this Sunday morning. We will have more. I'll see you again next Sunday. We are adjusting some of the format on class time, and but of course, the adjustment will only bring improvements. All right. So that's all for today. Thank you very much. Bye. Have your breakfast already.